ladies and gentlemen, Knapp.
1.5 feet between him and a spot in the city finals. 4 years in the making and right up it. Oh! Knapp can't stop.
Dalton and I were only 16 months apart, so he never really felt like the younger brother. When he was in 5th grade and I was in 6th grade, he was diagnosed with a form of leukemia.
I was 10 years old when I was diagnosed with Burkitt's leukemia. I was left with no muscle at all, basically could hardly walk.
That was a pretty shocking diagnosis for me. I really hadn't experienced cancer in my family yet before, let alone like somebody so close as like my brother.
Dalton here now, up and running on the course.
One of the top moments in my life is like watching him like compete on the show. It was super cool.
You can't stop Dalton Knapp. Dalton Knapp, the 21-year-old getting his first shot at the back.
Ready? We're rolling. Welcome back to the Eager Podcast. I have a very special guest today. I wrote a little intro for you.
Oh, wow.
So you
Okay.
got to tell me if I miss anything. He has competed in 3 seasons
Mhm.
of American Ninja Warrior. Accomplished gymnast, still continues to challenge himself athletically through different sports and disciplines like jiu-jitsu, rock climbing, disc golf, and many other things, which I probably don't even know of. He is the owner of this wonderful gym, if you want to pan through and just show Warrior Jungle, as well as you are, what is your position for Urban Battlefield?
Part owner.
Part owner.
Over there, yep.
Laser tag, fun place. Here in De Pere, Wisconsin. He's a good friend of mine, an inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, Knapp.
Wow, I would say that's a pretty darn good intro.
Yeah.
Thanks, Edgar.
Did I miss anything too major there?
No, I think that was good.
Awesome.
Covers a lot of it.
So, I first showed up in this gym in the summer of 2018. A little
Mhm.
16-year-old kid. Big fan of the Ninja Warrior show. I was watching that since I was like 12. I remember like the really early on seasons where they were like still going to Japan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I looked up online. I Googled Ninja Warrior Gym, Wisconsin, not knowing if that was a thing. And I found this place. And I told my dad, I was like, can we please go? Like, it seems so cool. And my dad also, he was so into the show. He loved watching it. And, I took him here, and it was amazing. I don't know. How did this come about? How did you end up creating your own ninja gym?
Well, first of all, I remember the first time you and your dad came in.
Yeah.
And you guys became like staples in our program for a
Mhm.
while, which was awesome. Basically, for you, it was until you went off to college.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was super awesome.
Mhm.
How this gym came to fruition, basically, it started off in my backyard. So,
Mhm.
2013, I was in high school, saw the show, the American version of the show,
Mhm.
and I'd watched the Japanese one, but because it was in Japan, you're like, oh, that's never going to happen
Mhm.
for me. But then it was on in the U.S., and I was like, oh, I could actually train for this thing. So
Mhm.
built a course in our backyard and got the okay from my parents. My brothers helped, and kind of just took off from there. So went through different variations of the course based on if like my parents moved houses and whatnot. So we kind of kept like upgrading, and it got to a point where I felt like I knew that I wanted to coach ninja
Mhm.
and to provide a facility where people could train at. I'd already spent a lot of my younger life coaching gymnastics.
Mhm.
I was an instructor at a rock climbing gym as well. So I had like that background working with people, and I figured I just needed to create a facility where people could come to and I could like grow a community. So
Yeah. I think
that's
you absolutely did that here. I was listening to Drooper Health, your podcast. Check it out, by the way. Really good podcast.
Thank you.
And you were talking about when you were younger, you were like really active, like always, doing different sports and stuff.
yeah.
How did gymnastics come about in your
That's a
life?
good question. Yeah, because gymnastics isn't like
It's not a
super
regular-
common
yeah.
especially for guys. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, it's tough to find a program first of all, and it's just not super popular. But
Mm-hmm.
my dad had practiced gymnastics a little bit growing up. He was never like in organized gymnastics, but he trained at his high school that had a bunch of equipment. And I remember him saying he helped out with like the women's high school gymnastics team, and he would screw around on like the gymnastics equipment like when he had time.
Yeah.
So he was like, oh, this is like a really good and functional sport, just like for overall like body awareness and development, and it translates to a lot of other sports. So he's like, we should see if our kids like it. And my brothers and I, we all got into it, and that became like our main thing. We kind of we knew it wasn't like super common and popular, but that almost became like a pride aspect of it for us. We're like, oh yeah, not a whole lot of people do this. So it was just kind of like a niche thing for us, which was pretty cool. And I'm really thankful because it really opened up the doors athletically for a lot of different things. And that was our main focus, like as far as like a club or practicing sport where we had coaches and whatnot. And it allowed us to just like enjoy other sports for fun. So I think I mentioned like in that podcast that we had access to like a lot of land. We had a pond growing up, and we were just like constantly having friends over, and we were playing volleyball, football, baseball, all these other activities. We swam a lot, kayaked, and we just like were able to do those for fun, and gymnastics became more of just like a serious thing, So I felt like because of that, I was really able to just like develop as like a well-rounded athlete.
Yeah. I think as well, gymnastics is like a really good base for ninja training.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously, like rock climbing is probably like one of the bigger ones, but being able to have that body awareness and control is huge, and that's something I very much lack.
Yeah, you had the strength part down.
Yeah, I've always had that, but especially with like rock climbing.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use my legs at all. I've been learning heel hooks every now. Like there was one route that I was stuck on, and I tried a heel hook, and I finally got it using that.
Okay.
But I'm just not flexible.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely like. For me, I noticed I was able to really just hop right into Ninja Warrior training because of my gymnastics background. And I was really fortunate because before I really got into ninja training, so in high school and growing up, it was gymnastics. When I went off to college, I really got into rock climbing. And when I was at college, I wasn't able to train ninja. So it was just continuing to do gymnastics, continuing to do rock climbing, get better at that. So I had this like rock climbing gymnastics base when I really started training ninja, and I felt like I could just like take off.
Yeah. There are different parts of the interview where we'll talk about all the other parts of your life, but I do want to just hit Ninja Warrior completely to start off with.
Sure.
I do remember seeing you on the show before I actually like knew about this place and knew about you.
Oh, that's awesome.
I remember seeing like Dalton's story and all that. So really inspirational. So can you tell us a little bit about Dalton's story and that first season you were on?
Yeah. I mean, Dalton's story has been like a huge driving force for me in general. So growing up, Dalton and I were only 16 months apart. So he never really felt like the younger brother. Honestly, we were always kind of like going head to head on things. And when he was in 5th grade and I was in 6th grade, he was diagnosed with a form of leukemia. And that was a pretty shocking diagnosis for me. I really hadn't experienced cancer in my family yet before, let alone like somebody so close as like my brother. And that was just is a very, very tough and growing year period, essentially. So like my brother over the next, I think it was like early 2007 going into like 2008, he spent, I think it was over 250 days in the hospital. He was in the hospital here at St. Vincent, and then he was also down in the Children's Hospital in Milwaukee. So we were constantly, wherever he was at, traveling back and forth. I missed a lot of school, and it was just one of those things where our lives kind of just got like turned upside down, obviously, especially for Dalton, but then like for my brother Carter and I, who's younger than both of us, we were just like spending all the time we could at the hospital with Dalton and trying to just make it as normal as possible. It was tough. There was a lot of points where we weren't, sure what was going to happen. Just stayed hopeful and thankful for the medical teams that were working with Dalton. And basically he went through many rounds of chemo, had to go ultimately through radiation, and then a bone marrow transplant, stem cell transplant. And that ended up doing it for him. That was like the trick. Yeah. So it was a very rough experience for him. I mean, just having to go through radiation and chemo, like the damage and toll that takes on your body. Like it took my brother Dalton years and years after that to like get to a point where he was able to be physically active like he had been prior. So
Mhm.
like prior to Dalton getting sick, he was bigger than me actually. So he was a little bit taller. Yeah, he was a little bit like bulkier than me.
Yeah.
And you know, having to go through like the radiation and the chemo and everything, that just kind of like stunted his growth track. And because he was so malnourished for such a long period of time, like he just didn't have like the flexibility or strength in his muscles, and it took him a long time to come back from that. So, you know, people look at like his cancer treatment as like a year-long thing, but really like that whole journey was multiple years after that. So
Years of recovery.
yeah, but he came back and
Yeah.
he got to compete on the show with
That's
me.
awesome.
I mean,
Pan up there.
yeah,
He's over there, Dalton.
posted right next to me in that red shirt. He's been an inspiration to
Yeah.
me for a long time, and just like the mental determination that he has is always been inspiring. He's usually someone that he's a brilliant kid too. Like he picks up on stuff like super quickly. Like he's always been way better at video games than Carter and I have ever been. But it's fun. He's great.
What are the you just mentioned you got to compete. When you're competing, what are the emotions of like how nervous are you versus watching Dalton compete?
Oh man, it's a different kind of stress and nervousness. Like you get these like before I compete, I get like a little bit of just like this butterflies in my stomach, but I'm able to really just like shift my focus to these mental course runs that I'm doing in my head, and that kind of alleviates some of like the nervousness. But like watching my brother Dalton, there's this mix of like pure joy and also like just straight nerves too. You're like, I know he can get through this course. I know he has the abilities. It's just a matter of like putting it together. So you're like, okay, just keep it together, put it together. You got this. But also be like being super excited because it was just such an awesome experience to like share with him. Yeah. So yeah. Oh man. Really, really good feeling though. I would say that's like one of the top moments in my life is like watching him like compete on the show. Awesome. It was super cool.
No, yeah, I remember watching it on TV and I was like, wow, like these are the people that like I'm training with them now, and just the whole story is just really inspirational and made me just want to keep coming back and keep training. I thought it was just amazing. Huge shout out to Dalton. Like watching him rock climb sometimes too, like he's superhuman.
Yeah,
I don't know
crazy.
how.
He's such
I'd love
a good
to see him in like
rock
one of the
climber.
Odyssey competitions or something, like how he would do.
Well, I was just thinking about this, and I was talking to Maggie about this, and like if he was, at the competition that we did in November, like there's no way I would have taken
He'd
first.
smoke everyone
Yeah, he
easily.
would have just smoked everyone. So
It's like Spider-Man, I swear. He's super flexible too.
yeah, he's crazy,
Ugh.
and he's short, right? So
Yeah.
he's at a disadvantage for a lot of these routes, but he makes up for it in his endurance and just like overall grip strength ability. And he's kind of like a tactician too. I remember, so I actually got Dalton into rock climbing. I remember his first couple competitions. That first year he started competing, he wouldn't even like study a route before he would climb it. He'd just go up to it and climb it. And it's cool to see his evolution as like a rock climber. And now he's like taking it way further than I have, and he's just incredibly strong. So
That's me right now. I just, especially the last one, like I would kind of sit there and look at it, but
yeah,
you can plan. At least for me, I try to plan out as much as I can. But the second I actually go on the wall, everything goes out the window.
goes out the window.
Everything.
Well, it's like, holds you think are going to feel one way
Yeah.
end up being way different or way harder, and then you kind of go into just like scramble mode,
So, yeah, that's Dalton's story. But when it comes to you on Ninja Warrior, you've had 3 seasons. Your last season was 2018, I believe, or
Yeah.
2018.
So it's 2016, 17, and 18.
Yeah. And you made it pretty far. I think, weren't you like the top 10 overall or something?
Yeah, so second season, I was top 10, and then my third season, I was within the top 5.
Top 5 overall.
So
That was a season where like barely anyone made it to stage 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we just had some hard stage 1 and stage 2 courses. So yeah.
Do you remember how you felt when you found out that you were like among the top 5?
It was pretty surreal. I think at the time I was mostly just frustrated that I didn't make it through stage 2 because I really thought I could, and I felt like I had been training for that style of course. but yeah, no, it was really, it felt like even though I hadn't like beat the course or won the show, I felt like I had made it as like a ninja,
Mhm.
like professional ninja at that point,
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, like I'm here, like I'm at the top.
Mhm.
I'm not at the very top, but I'm in that top range. And it was cool because at that point, my third season, especially like my third season on the show, like I feel like the other competitors really started to like respect like my abilities
Mhm.
as an athlete. So that was really cool, going from having watched the show to looking up to these athletes and then competing with them, and then just like being right up there at the top
Mhm.
was really cool. So
You think we'll see you on there again?
oh man, I don't know, we'll see. I don't really have that same passion for trying to get on the show as I did back then.
Mhm.
And I'm just looking at all these athletes that are competing right now, and it's like, man, even like
You're the young kids.
5 years ago compared to now, and
Yeah.
they're just operating at another level.
Mhm.
So I don't think I would do it for fun, but I don't know if I'd have the same expectations going into the show that I had in the past, just knowing where the level of competition is at now.
It's
If that
very
makes sense.
different. Like back then, people were just like, the big selling point was like, oh, it's like this is a mailman doing
Yeah.
the course. There's a firefighter. But now there's athletes training specifically for ninja.
Yeah.
And when they lowered the age to 15,
Yeah.
and I don't think anyone would expected them to be the ones at the top now. Like just
No, I
what's his
think
name? Caden Labsack. Like he's 17
yeah,
and
he was
final ninja twice back to back.
yeah, and I think he was younger than that when he first,
Yeah, I think it was 15 when his
Yeah.
first season, and he got to stage 4.
which is
Like
crazy.
within seconds of completing stage 4.
It's kind of funny because like those of us that were like really in the competitive scene like knew about these kids and
Oh,
knew how
really?
strong they were.
Yeah.
But like if you're just like a casual viewer to the show, like
Mhm.
you had no idea what was coming. So like for a lot of us, it wasn't a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the show definitely hyped it up like that. You're like, oh,
Oh
we
my
had
God,
no idea these
the
kids coming in
youngest
were going to
ninja.
be so good. But
Yeah.
I mean, these are kids that had been training since they were little, since they first saw the show.
Mm-hmm.
They had access to gyms, right away. Like when I started training, gyms weren't a thing.
You had to
Like,
build your own in the backyard.
we had a backyard course. We traveled to Buffalo, Minnesota, where
Yeah.
there was a gym. And this
Wow.
guy, Kevin Hogan, he created that and had a little community in Minnesota. But we would travel 5 hours
Mm-hmm.
a couple times a year to get to this gym. And yeah, now kids have home gyms,
Yeah.
like this, and they're just training nonstop, and it's become a real legitimate
It's a
like sport
sport.
for these kids.
Full sport. Yeah, I remember I nailed a couple 2x4s to my wall, and that was me doing the
Cliffhanger.
Still have that picture out there. It's so funny, but it's come a long way. Like, it's a business now. There's a lot of different gyms. There's
Yeah.
local competitions, which I want to get into a little bit. My first competition here, especially when you were talking about like how your nerves were. My first competition here, I couldn't feel my legs,
Yeah.
especially because Flip Rodriguez,
Yeah.
who was the one I looked up to the most
Yeah.
in Ninja, was here. I was like, how are you? Aren't you from like Miami or like LA or something? Like, he was here.
Yeah.
Jesse LeBrec and Chris and all of them, like these people that I looked up for years were just in this gym, and I was like completely starstruck, and I had to compete with them,
We sure did.
and that was I'll never forget that day. Like, it was one of the I wouldn't say definitely happiest, but like the nerves I was feeling, and I was so disappointed in myself too that day because I made like a little mistake
Sure.
that
yeah.
cost me like I feel like I would have done much better, but I made a little mistake and cost me maybe like a spot like I think because we were doing like there was like different divisions, right? There was like
Yeah.
the general division, and I could have maybe gotten first place, but made a little mistake that cost me. But yeah, I remember my nerves were just even like during the Odyssey, like whenever I do competitions,
Mhm.
I don't know how to control it.
Dude, it's tough. I mean, even after doing a lot of like competitions and competing, it gets better, but it's
Yeah.
still like there a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I definitely got to a point in my ninja career where I wouldn't get as nervous.
Mhm.
You get more nervous competing on the show because it's a bigger scale.
Yeah.
But a lot of these other competitions, I would just like go out there and try to trust my training and just do what I knew I could do, and it's just a matter of like putting together a solid run and
Mm-hmm.
almost treating it like practice sometimes.
Yeah.
That also helps with the nerves. But man, besides the rock climbing competition recently, and then I think we did the dyno competition last spring, I haven't
Mhm.
done a whole lot of competition.
Really?
So I feel like I'd be a little bit out of it. I wasn't nervous for the rock climbing competitions, but I bet if I did a ninja competition again, I'd be
Mhm.
a little nervous.
For the
again.
record, he won the rock climbing competition. I don't know. I remember I was watching you when you were doing that one blue route with the
Yeah.
big dyno. That was insane.
That was such a fun route. And it was funny because I just climbed that route again recently.
Yeah.
And I made the top look really difficult because
Yeah, you
I
were like
slipped.
shaking. Like I remember watching. Like,
Yeah.
everyone was watching you. You were like at a really weird angle, and you were like shaking, and somehow you got
Yeah.
it.
And I climbed it again, and it was much smoother. But I was
Yeah?
like, oh man, that was such a fun route.
I can't even figure out how to start it. I was trying to with her the other day, and I couldn't even start it.
Well, it started off so like such small holds.
Yeah.
Super crimpy, super technical.
Mhm.
And then the middle was like technical and huge dyno type moves. So
Mhm.
you're going from really technical crimpy to really big succession of like hard, huge moves. And then at the top, you had to be like, it was super balancy and you had to be super precise with your movements. And that's where I like had to save myself and come back
Mhm.
from the dead there. But man, that was such a fun competition. And I'm really thankful to Odyssey for coming to the area because it lit my
Yeah.
fire for rock climbing. Like that's really filling my cup right now.
Yeah.
And,
Such an awesome place.
Yeah, and
community, like
yeah, so many awesome people.
it's so yeah, I feel like I'm friends with like almost everyone there.
Yeah, super friendly.
Yeah.
And it's like a passion I get to share with Maggie
Mhm.
too. So it's like something that we're
She's
doing
really
together
good
all the
too.
time. Yeah, she's
Place in the podium.
top
She's
3
really
for
good.
her division, and she's getting super strong. So
Mhm.
it's cool to see like her progress as a climber.
How much, like, so obviously you do a lot of different like training. How much do you put into climbing specifically?
Oh man. No, this is kind of a interesting thing to look at because I was talking to Liam, one of the youth climbers there,
Mhm.
who's really strong. But
Mhm.
I only rock climb like twice a week.
Wow.
And
No.
that's because I put in the time prior.
Yeah.
So like when I was in college and when I was doing a lot of rock climbing, I was climbing like
Mm-hmm.
4 times a week, 5 times a week sometimes.
Yeah.
And I put in those hours and I've gotten to a point, and the same thing goes for Ninja, where I can maintain and make progress off of a lot less time and effort,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool. It's kind of like, you've filled this cup of effort and skill and ability,
Mm-hmm.
and it stays with you,
Yeah.
which is awesome. But it also means that my plateaus are huge, so they're very slow moving. So at this point between rock climbing and Ninja, I don't expect to make super fast progress
Mhm.
anymore. It's kind of just like, okay, staying consistent and
Yeah.
let things happen. So, but yeah, it's nice. I don't have to train as vigorously and as often as
Wow.
I used to, which honestly was much better for my body.
Yeah.
I'm not injured nearly as much as I used to be, which
Mhm.
is great. And the reason I was talking to Liam about that is because I feel like he's just injured all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was just at the gym yesterday and
Mm-hmm.
he was limping around. And I was like, "Where's Liam?"
Oh, Leo.
I was like, "What did you
He
do?"
just hurt his
man?"
knee pretty bad, so.
Yeah. I was like, "Liam, I see you're limping. Did you hurt yourself?" He's like, he didn't respond right away. He's like,
Yeah.
"Nah, I didn't. I don't hurt myself." I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, sure."
No, climbing is awesome, especially like because I had like the base of like ninja training, and I
Yeah.
only started consistently rock climbing like maybe 8-9 months ago, and seeing like the progress I've made, because I can only do like 5/8, 5/9 when I first started,
Yeah.
and now I'm doing like I'm super close to this 11 plus, and I'm like there, and like I would try those routes when I first got to the gym, and I couldn't even start them, I couldn't even hold on. Now actually, and it's not even too much of strength, it's just technique. I'm learning these different techniques and how to actually like use my legs a little better and how to hold, and like especially like how to shift your body weight and stuff
Yeah.
like that, like turning the hips. It's very technical.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know I have the strength from building it up here.
Yep.
But I have to learn a little bit more of that technique, and I feel like I could be a much better climber.
Yeah. And that's definitely something. I mean, it comes obviously with doing it, but it also comes with like putting a focus in that area.
Mhm.
So like for me personally, like I remember I spent a lot of time like watching stronger climbers
Mm-hmm.
during training sessions and just like seeing how they moved and try to like emulate. I also like, because I was doing ninja and gymnastics, I was more of like a powerhouse climber. So dynos, I love dynos.
Yeah, that's me as well.
Yeah. And I had to really like shift. I continued like working on those because it's good to really hone in on a skill that you're good at. But I really started to focus on like climbing more controlled and slower and really like being super intentional with movements. And then I also really found it beneficial in figuring out balancing points and like how to position my body. That came kind of along with that. So, some mindfulness and focus when you're climbing is go a long way in regarding the body positioning and whatever else and the technical aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any aspirations to compete in climbing at a higher level, or
no?
Are you happy with just the local ones?
Yeah, I'm happy with the local ones. If I can be kind of like a little bit of like a local crusher, I'm cool with that. I don't really have I don't think the time or the drive to put into becoming a really strong professional climber. I don't even know if it could happen, honestly, because those people put in so much time and years and effort. And the closest hope in my family is probably Dalton.
Yeah.
But, even for him, he realizes like how far off that is to be like, competing like at the Olympics. Like the way that it's set up at the Olympics too is like, now that rock climbing is there, you have to be good at all three disciplines, like bouldering, speed climbing, and sport lead climbing. Like
speed climbing is crazy.
Yeah.
I've seen some videos of it. And I'm like, what?
That's something I always wanted to get into.
Yeah.
Just never had access to it because I felt like that played towards like my strengths as like the type of ninja I was, the type of athlete. It's funny.
Strength.
Yeah, I got on a speed climbing wall. This is probably back in 2017 at a gym in Minnesota. And like, I think the fastest people are climbing like 5 seconds right up this thing. And I didn't do too bad. I was like, I think I was like right around like the 10, 11 second mark. So I was like, okay, for like somebody who's not a speed climber, mostly a ninja, like I was pretty solid. So I was like, oh man, if I put in some work on that, but
we have to think about like to make up that ground. It's like they're doing it twice as fast.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah. Those climbers, man,
it's so fun to watch.
Something else.
Also, like the bouldering. Like professional bouldering right now is super cool. It's like really athletic, and it's not just like straightforward like hard crimps and whatnot. Like they're doing these crazy acrobatic like
people are doing splits
moves.
Yeah,
like,
it's
insane.
nuts.
Like laches
Hanging
and like upside down stuff and all these tosses and like coordination moves. It's like bouldering has become really, really cool form of climbing.
And for those competitions, can't they like? They don't know the route, right? They just show up and plan it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times they are like kept blind, like in a holding area. Especially like for like finals routes, like what we did at this last competition. They had all of us finals climbers
couldn't even watch.
No, we couldn't watch each other, which is good. I like that. And honestly, I wish that Ninja was more like that. It's just tough. Like if you're hosting a competition in a gym, you don't really have the means of. So. But yeah, I think that's an awesome and cool aspect of rock climbing as a sport.
So yeah, you've recently been doing a little podcast called Druber Health.
Yes.
I got really into it just because recently I've kind of been on a journey of my own to get healthier. I used to be very like the only physical activity I got was here, and that was like twice a week.
Yeah.
Outside of that, like eating bad, like not really doing anything. I was kind of like skinny fat. Like I had a bit of a belly, and my arms were just non-existent. Went off to college, I was still like that for a bit. It wasn't really until like my junior to like senior year of college where I'm like, I need to get in the gym and like start getting fit consistently. And honestly, there was one moment where there was a competition here. And I showed up. That was when I was still in college. And I showed up and I was like, hey, Drew, I only went to the gym once. I'm here to compete. And I didn't do too well in that one. And at that point, I'm like, if I actually want to not only like succeed in competitions, but just be like a healthy person overall, I need to get some sort of consistently and not only working out, but also eating. Yeah. And your podcast is all about, at least for what it is when I was like the nutrition side of things.
Yeah.
So how did you end up, what started your journey to like better nutrition?
Man, I think it was really just like awareness, and I started really looking at like my overall health. Growing up, my idea of health and fitness, it wasn't like necessarily like nutrition had like a huge aspect on that. It was really just like the training that I was doing. But I really started to look into like how I was feeling, how many injuries I was going through, like overtraining. Was I keeping up with the nutrition that I needed to compete at a high level. So it's funny, nutrition didn't really become a big thing for me until after I had stopped competing on the show.
Really?
Yeah, it was like 2019, and I just started looking at things, and some things kind of like started to get on my radar of things to be like looking out for, and really it's just a matter of awareness and like taking control. I think a lot of people don't know where to start. For me, this has become a huge passion for me. So like I can read all these studies and the data and listen to these podcasts, and my brain, because I am so interested in it, I just hold on to this information super well. And I know that's not the case for everybody. So like, you know, if you're listening to these podcasts or, you know, looking up information on your own, you know, it's good to just like revisit and go back on these things. And I wanted to create with my podcast just shorter episodes focusing on like specific things that I felt like could be really beneficial for people. So like the first 6 episodes of my podcast are really things that people should look out for that aren't really like talked about, or you wouldn't find on like a food label.
Yeah.
So most people don't know about these things. And I wanted to just give people that information so they could do with it what they wanted to once they kind of have all of the tools. So for me, it was a matter of just like finding all of these things. And there's still so much more out there that I didn't discuss, but these are like some big things right away in at least the first 6 episodes. But there's so much out there that is working against us that I'm finding. And there's also a lot of the good stuff that we need to be feeding our bodies to be operating at a maximum level, we're not getting enough of. So it's a matter of like having too much of the bad stuff and not enough of the good stuff. And I'm just noticing that overall as like a society, that's a consistent problem, which is really unfortunate. So you're seeing a medical system that is just focused on treating and not prevention. And you're seeing the food system that is not focused on health or prevention either. It's just a matter of, you know, corporations like lining their pockets, and it's unfortunate. So I'd say like right now more than ever, like the consumers are at a huge disadvantage. Like if you go in and you haven't done any research on your own, like majority of the grocery store is garbage, unfortunately. And that's what most people are working with. So
a lot of people like when they say they want to eat healthy, they kind of make excuses as to why they can't. Like the healthier food is too expensive and stuff like that. What do you say to that?
Well, I say obviously like you have to work within your means, but your health is an investment. So that means the food you're eating is an investment towards your future health. So if you're not willing to do that, you know, you can expect to be paying medical bills. You know, that money's going somewhere else. Like if your health, if you're not putting that effort into and that investment into your health, then you're gonna be paying for it at some point later in life, and you might be paying more. Like I think of it this way, like I enjoy grocery shopping so much now. Like I love searching out like the good foods, and I know that this stuff is like the stuff I'm getting for my body is nourishing, it's enriching, and it is an investment. And I also like make sure that I love flavor. Like I'm a huge, like if I'm eating food, I want to be enjoying it. So like I'm putting just as much effort into making sure this food like tastes good. And it's just like this all around just like enriching experience, like between like the flavor and just knowing that I'm getting like really solid nutrient dense food in is just like that also fills my cup. So I'm hoping other people can kind of find that and just know that, you know, healthy eating is an investment in your health and an investment in your future. So and there's different levels to it. Like you can still be eating healthier and not have to go with the most expensive organic food. You know, there's steps you can take to still improve your health that you don't have to go all the way. Just work within your means. So people have options out there. It just requires a little work and some effort, I think, to get there.
That's what I was going to ask, is like, what kind of tips do you have for people who are just in that beginning of the journey of trying to eat healthier?
Yeah. Biggest thing for people, I think, is really cutting back on processed food. That's like I mentioned, is majority of the grocery store. So
Mhm.
there's different levels of processed food. It's funny, I just listened to a podcast, and this guy, the endocrinologist, broke it down where there was like 4 different aspects. There's like 4 different Nova sections. So there's like Nova 1, Nova 2, Nova 3, and Nova 4. Nova 3 and Nova 4 are like more processed stuff. So that's like if you're getting like applesauce or like an apple pie imitation thing at the grocery store, that's like a
Mhm.
treat snack, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like Nova 1 and Nova 2, Nova 1 would be just an apple straight from the tree that hasn't been, treated with pesticides, and it's non-GMO.
Mhm.
Nova 2 would be like if you took that apple and sliced it up, put it in a bag, so that's like a little more work has gone into the processing of it. But
Mhm.
if people can stick to like the less processed food, you're going to be cutting out of all these toxins that are added in there, preservatives and whatnot, and just like food that's been modified and gone through. Like these foods have to be preserved because of all the work that they've gone into. They're meant to last a long time, and that's
Mhm.
just not, the stuff that's going in there is not healthy for us. So like me personally, anything that's not nourishing me is essentially, for me, it's a net loss, and I consider it to be almost like it's just waste going in my body, right?
Mhm.
If it's not going to be helping me out, it's almost essentially, you have stuff that's like maybe not harmful to you, but it's not helping you out. And then you also have stuff that's tasty, but it's like harmful. It's
Yeah.
essentially like poison. Like it's not helping us out at all. So it's just one of those things where you have to be really focused on what you're putting into your bodies. And I think a lot of that just comes down from getting rid of processed food. Like if you can eliminate that, you are going to set yourself up for huge health improvement. If you can stick to just like whole foods, foods that haven't been, treated with pesticides and chemicals. And then the other thing too is ingredient lists. So obviously, like I like to look at the foods that I'm getting, and a shorter ingredient list typically the better.
Mhm.
So like I share this example all the time. I know cottage cheese isn't a favorite for a lot of people, but if you go to the grocery store and you look at like a Kemp's brand cottage cheese, it has a huge ingredient list, and it's because of all the preservatives and thickeners and whatnot that they add in there that don't need to be in there. So let's say that ingredient list is like 20 ingredients long for cottage cheese.
Mhm.
It's literally just dairy that's been, aged. And then you have Daisy brand cottage cheese, which is, it's not organic, it's not anything special, but it's literally just milk, cheese, cream, and like salt.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Mhm.
So, and I would say like Kemp's is more popular than Daisy. Like
Mhm.
that's just like a huge brand, dairy brand out on the shelves. And so
Mhm.
you can just assume that a majority of people are just taking that one. They're not looking at the ingredient list, and they're getting all of these harmful things along with the cottage cheese that they're trying to eat. So it's just all these companies are just like throwing stuff in there that doesn't need to be in there. It's harmful for us, and that's where it comes down to us as consumers to really take action and take effort into looking out for what we're actually eating. So biggest thing is staying away from processed food, but also just like taking some time to look at the ingredient list and trying to cut back on, like if you're reading an ingredient and you don't know what it is,
No.
it's probably best
Yeah.
to stay away
It's
from
got
it.
like a weird like name, like some random chemical.
Yeah.
Probably stay away from it.
Like carrageenan, like do you even know? Like nobody knows what
What
that
is
is, and it's like in so much of our
Yeah.
like food that we're eating, and especially
It's
like dairy
crazy.
products. Yeah, it's crazy.
The scary thing though, because we consume so much, and like, especially in your podcast, you talk a lot about like anti-nutrients, and
Mhm.
I was really shocked to hear how much foods have like all these different anti-nutrients. and,
Yeah, it's wild.
I was gonna ask, like, obviously, like, we should stay away from these anti-nutrients, but if there was like one that you really like, one we could focus on, because
Sure.
there's so many, and it's like almost impossible to keep track of all of them. But there's like one
Mhm.
anti-nutrient that we should stay away from. What do you think it is?
Man, I think for me, like looking at phytic acid, it's
Mhm.
really easy to accommodate that one. So the biggest issue with phytic acid is the fact that it chelates and binds to minerals. So it keeps you from absorbing the minerals in your food, or even the minerals that are found in the plant food that is containing phytic acid. So you might be eating like whole wheat, right? Or something that you are thinking is healthy,
Yeah.
like oatmeal, and you're actually not getting any of the minerals from that
Oatmeal's
food
not healthy.
because
That's like my
it contains
go-to
phytic
breakfast.
acid, and that phytic acid is just stealing all of
Yeah.
the minerals that your body needs. And you're essentially just getting these
Oh no.
empty. You're getting like some fiber.
Yeah.
But there's also like studies showing that, you know, phytic acid in general, and there's other things in oatmeal that's not super great, but
Yeah.
phytic acid in general is a gut disruptor as well. So not only is it like stealing the minerals, but it's also keeping you from absorbing proteins
Wow.
and foods and fats as
Really?
efficiently. So
Wow.
it's just one of those things where I still have foods with phytic acid from time to time, but I'm really strategic with it. So like if I'm going to have a lot of milk or a lot of like nutrient dense dairy or meat, like if I'm eating a lot of red meat with a meal, I'm trying not to eat it with foods that contain phytic acid, because then I'm like, okay, I want to set myself up with this meal to absorb as much of the good stuff as I can. So I'll have, I think I mentioned this in the podcast, but if I'm going to have like rice or potatoes or some sort of bread, I'm going to eat it with like chicken or something instead. Chicken is going to have less nutrient. It's going to be less nutrient dense than red meat. So like if I am having chicken and red meat, like those are the meals that I've like prepared, I'll eat the phytic acid stuff with the chicken, or I'll just have it by itself. So or just like dairy that I'm not super concerned about. Like sometimes I'll have like this healthier like sour cream. I'll mix in like a French onion packet, and then I'll have some avocado oil chips, and I'll eat that, because it's good to have healthy fats with a lot of these like starches in grains, and it helps you kind of absorb like the carbohydrates a little bit better, and it allows them to do less damage to your gut as well by having like the fats in there as like a protective source. So like I like to still combine foods, but I'll save like the really healthy foods to just eat on their own.
Yeah.
Like when I'm drinking my whole like raw milk, it's going to be during a meal of like meat, or I'm just drinking it. Like my thing now is like I'll have 32 ounces in like a mason jar of raw milk, and I'll mix in some maple syrup, and that's my post-workout drink. So like I'll bring that to the climbing gym. I'll keep it in a little cooler in my car, and then as soon as I get back to my car, I'm done climbing, I'm drinking that 32 ounces of milk, and I look forward to it. It just like completes my my workout. And there's something about dairy. I think there's a little bit of like in general with dairy, there's like a little bit of like a dopamine hit too. So it's like one of those foods that's good for you, and it's like a solid like dopamine hit. Whereas like sugar, that's a dopamine hit, right?
For sure.
And a lot of these sugars aren't great for you. So finding that dopamine hit with food elsewhere is a good call for sure.
I'm actually like a big milk drinker.
Oh, good.
It's weird.
But raw milk, I've never had it before, and I was gonna ask you about it. 'Cause when you texted me, you were like, "Oh, you have like a raw milk. Are you doing that today?"
Yeah.
I was like, you go to a place to pick up raw milk.
Yeah.
Well, how is that different to like regular? Because I grew up drinking 2%.
Yeah.
But when
same.
I can, I try to have whole milk. But what's the main difference between regular
That's
milk?
such a good question.
raw?
That's actually going to be the episode this week.
You know
on the
what? Tune
podcast.
in to the podcast if you want to find out. We can answer that later.
I'll give you a quick little overview.
All right.
Milk in general, I think people should be having in their diets if they can.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's different levels. Some people are lactose intolerant, and that's because milk is pasteurized. Raw milk is not pasteurized, so it's going to contain the lactobacilli, basically lactase creating bacteria. Lactase is an enzyme, so this bacteria creates this enzyme, and this enzyme helps us break down lactose. With pasteurized milk, it's not in there. All of the bacteria and enzymes have been killed through the pasteurized heating process. So essentially you're getting like a skeleton or a shell of what milk used to be. So you're still getting like the macros, maybe not as much, but like you're getting your fats and your proteins and your carbohydrates from it. But and I'll go over the stats in my episode, but you're really like, there's a huge decrease in like the minerals, the protein, the bacteria, obviously, and the enzyme that you're losing out on by not having like raw milk. That being said, I still think like getting in dairy, if you can, is super beneficial to your health because it's a good source of like minerals and nutrients. There's definitely different levels to it. Like if you can get milk that's been pasteurized but at a much lower temperature, that's going to be better for you. And there's milk, like if people have issues with milk, usually it's either that they don't have lactase enzyme producing bacteria in their gut and they're not getting it from the milk, so they're usually like lactose intolerant. The other one is that the most milk on the market, just like normal milk, you go to Walmart and you buy their Great Value brand whole milk. That's going to be A1 protein milk. And the A1 milk that protein is harder for people to digest than, let's say, A2 milk. And A2 it's becoming more popular in that strain. There's like certain cows that produce it, but that's typically better on people's guts. So like if you haven't been able to digest milk in the past, find A2. Find a lower temperature pasteurized milk. There's brands out there that do it. They're just a little bit harder to find. Or if you really want to take steps to the best quality milk, it's raw milk. And you just want to make sure that when you're getting your raw milk, that it's the farm that's doing it is practicing really safe and hygienic milking practices. That's the big thing. You don't want to just like assume like a farm is doing their due diligence. So you got to do your research, but like, if you have access to good, clean, raw milk, that's so beneficial for your health.
I really want to try it now.
Yeah.
I'd love to. Because I would just have like a glass of milk.
Yeah.
People think that's weird, but
No, dude.
I was just like, oh, I really want some milk, and I just.
It is interesting. There's like some stigma from people on milk, but okay, let's say we're just talking about like breast milk here, but like when you are born, the first section of your life, like that is what you're getting, and that is the reason we're getting that, and like babies are brought up on that right away is because that's going to be like the most nutrient dense form and most easily digestible nutrient dense source of food and like nutrition. In the fact that we have the ability to continue drinking like a form of milk past like the breastfeeding years is like super beneficial. So yeah, milk can be looked at, if you think about it, as like, oh, it's coming from like a cow and udder's milky, but it's like, you look at it from a food standpoint, it's one of the most beneficial nutrient dense foods and drinks out there, like and I think people just kind of take that for granted. So drink milk if you can.
Drink milk.
Whole milk is great. If that doesn't do it for you, A2, low temperature pasteurized, and then all the way to raw milk. Like if you can get there, that's awesome.
Wow, that's awesome. I have a couple, only 3, but like I have like myth or fact about like just misconceptions about like nutrition and that I want to go over with you. So my mom always tells me this, but she says that the healthiest part of a fruit is the peel. Is that a myth or a fact?
That's a double-edged sword because it's going to have some nutrients, but it's also like if you look at an apple, the phytic acid is in the peel. It's not in like where the sugar is. It's also for fruits, if they're being treated with pesticides and chemicals, the peel is going to have the highest concentration of that. So I was told that too, like growing up, but it is more so a myth. Especially like for me, the way I'm eating fruit for the carbohydrates. Yeah. I'm not eating it for the minerals and nutrients. So I don't need the peel at all. Like, and there's a good chance that if I'm eating the peel, I'm also not getting those minerals, right? So I'm getting the minerals from other sources of my diet, and I'll eat the fruit for whatever additional benefits. I might still get maybe a little bit of like mineral absorption and whatnot, but I'm doing it for like the sugars, the healthy sugars, and the carbohydrates, and the fiber that's along with it. So
interesting.
But yeah, so I would say myth on that one.
My mom's wrong. She's never wrong.
Oh man.
Vegetable oils are good for you. It's vegetable, right?
You're right. It's
That sounds
vegetable.
good.
Oh
Myth
man,
or fact?
it's funny because I used to have this bit of like a person who's like, yeah, it's got vegetable in the name, like it's. But no, it's vegetable oil is highly processed to be even considered like edible.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the vegetable oil on the market is rancid because of the temperature it needs to be heated to make it
Mm-hmm.
edible. So you're rancid. It's being, unless it's stored properly, like it's being oxidized.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also creating more free radicals in it. And then the fact that vegetable oils are like super high in polyunsaturated fats, omega-6s, and these like chains of like fatty acids, they're like double bonded, they're weak, they break down, they oxidize very easily, and when they're used in our bodies, like wherever we use fat cells in our bodies, they're just weaker, they break, they're less good. So there's a lot of issues with vegetable oils, and they're super prominent. People are eating them because they lower LDL cholesterol, but there's so many studies coming out now that are proving that our thinking on cholesterol needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
LDL is, people have been treating LDL like it's been a causation factor, and it's really just a correlated factor. It's just an aspect that can be affected by your overall health, and high LDL, unless you have a specific genetic disease that affects your LDL,
Mm-hmm.
high LDL doesn't mean that you're going to be at risk for any sort of cardiovascular deal or like disease at that point. So there's a lot of like misconceptions there. People will be advised to eat vegetable oil to lower their LDL, but you look at cholesterol, so there's LDL, HDL. You can even break LDL into two different components. There's a large buoyant LDL and small dense. Now, majority of our LDL is large buoyant, and that has zero impact on our cardiovascular health.
Wow.
So if you're lowering all of these cholesterol aspects,
Mm-hmm.
cholesterol is essential for enzyme and hormone production in the human body. And if you're lowering that, you are limiting your body's ability to perform at a maximum capacity. And I talk about this a lot in my podcast, but like metabolic health, that's what it comes down to, is crucial. And we need to be feeding our bodies with the nutrients to promote metabolic health, and we need to be limiting like the toxins. That's what it comes down to.
That's huge because through like food marketing, they always say like high cholesterol is bad, and like the Cheerio commercials and all that. Like,
yeah, Cheerios are heart healthy.
so high cholesterol is not a bad thing.
Not necessarily,
necessarily.
unless you have like some other issues going on. But yeah, no.
Wow.
From the research I've done,
That's crazy. And these are just things we're led to believe just because it's always on TV and the way that food is marketed.
There's other markers that we should be looking at, and I don't think cholesterol, based on the research that I've done, cholesterol is not a causational factor. It's correlation.
Wow. And my last one: to avoid getting fat, you must avoid foods with fat. Seems pretty straightforward.
That is also a myth.
Oof.
That's so funny because it's kind of along the same lines as cholesterol. Dietary cholesterol does not get absorbed in like it doesn't get utilized as metabolic cholesterol. So like that's, people were afraid of eating eggs for the longest time because it was high in cholesterol.
Yeah.
There's no basis to that fact. Same thing for fat. Like our bodies utilize fat for so many different things, and it's like an essential product for our neurons firing, for hormone production, which is key. Really what it comes down to is that our body fat comes from the excess sugars and whatnot that we're eating. It's stored energy, right? Now the issue is that our mitochondria, when it gets limited through toxins or lack of nutrients or whatever, it's not operating efficiently, because normally when we're creating ATP, our body's energy source, we're converting sugars into ATP. Healthy mitochondria can convert that sugar into a lot of ATP, whereas like unhealthy mitochondria, you might only get like 2 ATP from that production from a single sugar, whereas like others you might get a lot more. So it's really a matter of like, don't be afraid of fat. Fat is like super healthy for you. Really what you should be worried about is getting in all of these processed and added sugars. That's huge. The other thing too is like there's a huge misconception that calories in, calories out. Like
That's
calories
huge.
are the huge thing. Like
Yeah.
if you want to lose weight, just put yourself on a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
That's not it either. Like you should be fueling yourself. If you're fueling yourself with good, healthy, nutritious food, you don't have to worry about the calories you're putting in because your body's actually going to be able to utilize the energy that you're putting in. It's when your body is at a deficit, your mitochondria aren't functioning as well. So really, like, obesity is one of like the first signs of like mitochondrial dysfunction. It means your body's just not operating well. It's not that your mitochondria is now operating poorly because of obesity. It's like, it's a downstream effect essentially. So there's a lot more I could talk about there, but as far as that goes, don't be afraid of fat and calorie deficit diets. They might make you lose weight in the short run, but you're not doing it in a healthy aspect. You're limiting yourself from getting vital nutrients, and you might be losing some weight and some fat. You're probably losing muscle, and you are also, it's essentially like a starvation thing. So you're just not getting the nutrients you need to be functioning at an optimal level.
If any of this information interests you, there's a whole podcast. It's called the Drooper Podcast. I've mentioned a couple of times. It'll be linked in the description. I think you're about like 6-7 episodes.
Yeah, 6 episodes. Actually, I guess 6 in a Q&A, so 7 episodes. But 8th episode will be coming out this week, hopefully tomorrow.
And it's nice because they're like short, so you don't have to like commit too much time. Like I finish them like on my way to work and on my way back.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so definitely check it out if you want to learn more about everything we just talked about. But yeah, just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, I did want to go into a little bit more about my story of coming here to Warrior Jungle. I don't know if I ever really had the chance to tell you, but like when me and my dad first got here, it was actually like a really difficult time in our lives. He had just gotten separated with my mom, and I ended up living with my dad, and my other siblings went living with my mom. So we were just kind of, family was split up a bit there. And he was in a rough spot, I would say. I've never seen him in that way. And coming here and having the routine of like coming here and working out together, spending time together, especially, not letting him be alone, and kind of having, our family was kind of broken at the time, but having a family here, it was something we really needed, and I didn't really appreciate it much at the time, but like looking back, I was like, wow, we really needed that, and I'm so glad that we found this place and grateful. So I just wanted to thank you for like having this space for us and creating that community for us.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate you sharing that too. It just goes to show, like, when creating an environment like this, like it can be helpful, like so many aspects. You never really know, what somebody could be going through. This could be like you said, like the highlight of their week. And I always thought it was really cool that you were able to train with your dad.
Yeah.
I think that's like an awesome, like this is such a cool activity to be able to experience that.
Like, who does this with their dad?
Yeah.
I really want to get him back in the gym. It's been a while since he's been in here, but and he was better than me in a lot of aspects.
He was strong.
Yeah, he was really strong. And it's been a couple years. He's had a kid since then. So he's put on some weight. So we'll see how he does. I do want to get him back and see if he's still strong. But it was really like if we didn't have this, I mean, I feel like our relationship would have kind of gone downhill as well, because like we were hanging out because of this, we'd be like talking, having deep conversations on like the car ride back and forth, and coming here brought us closer.
It gave you the opportunity to really like bond and connect.
Exactly. We bonded over this. Really grateful that this place exists.
That's so cool. That's awesome.
And with that, I think that's a wrap. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about all the nutrition ranting.
No, don't be so. That's good.
Up,
that's good. That's really good. Like I said, check out Drooper Podcast. Check out what else you got. Check out Warrior Jungle.
Yeah, check out Warrior Jungle.
If you're in the area, Warrior Jungle. Also Urban Battlefield, which I'm actually coming to in a couple of days with some friends.
Ooh, sick.
Which I've never been there.
Oh, dude, it's
I've never done it before. I can't believe I've been here like so many years. I've never actually tried it. So I'm excited to actually try it.
You're gonna have a blast.
Laser tag. You got what else you got?
That's
That's it.
That's basically it. Yeah, just podcast, Druber Health Podcast. You can find me on Spotify and YouTube right now. Basically, I'm just kind of posting information on my Instagram account. So
Mhm.
you can just look up Drew Knapp.
All links down below.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for watching.
Yeah.
Eager Podcast is coming back in full force in 2024. So get ready.
Get ready.
We'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.
Thanks, Edgar.
Oh, God.